My name is Marlene Whitaker. I was 51 years old when my husband wrote love letters to another woman during our wedding reception. I want you to hold that sentence for a moment before I explain anything else, because everything I am about to tell you depends on you understanding what kind of woman I am and what kind of woman I am not. I am not the kind of woman who misses things. I am a hotel catering manager. I have spent 26 years in the business of organized hospitality, which is a polite way of saying, I have spent 26 years making sure that nothing goes wrong in rooms full of people who are paying a great deal of money for nothing to go wrong. I have caught wrong table numbers before the guests sat down. I have caught missing signatures before the contracts were filed. I have caught servers pocketing cash tips that should have been pooled, and I have caught kitchen vendors shorting the shrimp count by exactly 10% because they assumed the woman checking the invoice was doing it as a formality. I notice details for a living. I have been noticing details since before most of the people I manage were born. What I am telling you is that I am not a woman who was fooled because she was careless. I am a woman who was fooled because she made a specific choice at a specific moment to call a wrong detail something other than what it was. That is a different kind of mistake, and it took me a long time to understand the difference. One is blindness. The other is hope wearing a very convincing disguise. The main proof in this story is 3 cream envelopes. Hotel bridal suite stationery, the good kind, with a small embossed crest at the top corner. Sealed with a gold sticker, the same circular gold sticker we used on the wedding favor cards, because Daniel had charmed the event coordinator into letting him take a sheet of them for what he called a personal project. If you are still with me when I get to what was inside those envelopes, I want you to remember one line specifically. It was not a love line. It was not a romantic line. It was a banking line. 4 words that told me exactly what my marriage was and what it had been designed to do. But I am getting ahead of myself, and this story needs to be told in order, because the order is the whole point. Daniel Whitaker came into my life 2 years before that wedding, at a charity fundraiser dinner that a mutual acquaintance had dragged us both to for different reasons. He was charming, in the particular way of men who have learned that charm is more efficient than effort. Easy to talk to, quick to laugh, interested in the right things at the right moments. He remembered details about what you had said the last time you spoke, which I now understand is not warmth but technique, though I did not understand that then. We dated for 14 months before he proposed. The engagement lasted 7 months. On the evening of the wedding, we had been together for just under 2 years, which I mention only to say that 2 years is enough time to know someone, and I thought I knew him. And I was correct about every surface detail and wrong about everything underneath. What I had was not wealth, but it was stability, and stability, I have learned, is what certain kinds of men are specifically looking for. I owned a 2-bedroom house outright, no mortgage, paid off 4 years before Daniel and I met, through a combination of careful living and a settlement from my first marriage that I had. Managed correctly when I could have managed it badly. I had $74,000 in a savings account. I had grown through years of double shifts and a consistent refusal to spend money on things that only felt necessary in the moment. I had a pension building at the hotel. I had no debt. I was not glamorous. I was solvent, which is an entirely different thing, and for a certain kind of man, it is the more attractive quality. Daniel said his divorce had cleaned him out. He said it with the mild, rueful honesty of a man who was embarrassed but not ashamed, which I found disarming. I had seen divorce do that to people I respected. I did not judge him for it. I paid for most of the wedding because he said he wanted us to have the celebration we deserved. And he was not in a position to contribute equally. And I agreed because I was not marrying him for what he could contribute financially. I was marrying him for what I believed we were building together. There was a wire transfer scheduled for the Monday after the wedding. It was meant to move a portion of my savings into a joint account we had opened together at my branch, earmarked for a lake cottage Daniel had been calling our second start for 6 months. My home key had already been copied for him. It was sitting on his keychain next to his car fob. The wedding gift checks? From 112 guests who had come to celebrate what they believed was a genuine beginning, were in an envelope in my evening bag. My name was about to become permanently tied to his in every way that mattered. That is what I stood to lose. Not romance. Access. My own access to my own life, turned over to a man who had spent 14 months studying exactly how to receive it. To understand why I handled that night the way I did, you need to understand the wound that came before Daniel, because it did not start with him. My first husband left with a credit card debt I did not know existed. Not a small one, not a manageable one. The kind you find when you pull your own credit report 18 months after the divorce. Because a car loan application comes back wrong. My younger sister borrowed money 3 separate times over the course of a decade and called it family help until I stopped offering and she stopped calling. And what I felt when the calls stopped was mostly relief, which told me something about what those calls had actually cost. My mother's version of love was conditional on usefulness. She praised me when I fixed something. She worried out loud when I was not fixing anything, which was her way of saying she needed me to fix something. I grew up understanding that my value was attached to what I could manage, and that understanding did not disappear when I became an adult. It just became harder to see, because I had built a life around managing things well, and it felt like capability, not wound. Daniel entered my life, acting grateful for my steadiness. He said it often, directly, in ways that felt like recognition. Like he was the first person who had ever seen what I was doing and understood what it cost. He loved that I planned. He loved that I organized. He loved that I could handle logistics without becoming anxious about them, that I could read a contract before signing it, that I never lost paperwork or forgot appointments or left things unfinished. He called it one of the things that made me different from anyone he had ever been with. I believed him, partly because I wanted to, and partly because the recognition felt real, in a way that was very difficult to separate from truth. What I understand now is that he loved my capability, the way a man loves a well-designed tool. Not with tenderness, but with a very particular kind of relief. The relief of knowing the work would get done and he would not have to do it. The wrong details were not hidden. I want to be honest about that, because the cleanest version of this story would have Daniel as a masterful deceiver and me as a woman who was helpless against his skill. And that is not what happened. The wrong details were visible. I saw them. And each time, I made a choice to call them something other than what they were, and those choices are mine to own. This is not self-blame. It is accuracy. And accuracy is the only thing that has ever been fully on my side. During the reception, Daniel left the head table twice. The first time was during the father-daughter dance, when most of the room's attention was on the dance floor and the lighting had shifted warm and golden over that side of the room. I noticed him stand, excuse himself to his brother beside him with a hand on the shoulder, and disappear toward the back corridor. I noticed because I always notice movement at the head table during high-sentiment moments. It is a catering instinct. You track who is where in case something needs managing. I told myself he needed air. I told myself some men find emotional moments difficult. The second time was after the cake cutting, approximately 40 minutes later. He came back both times smelling faintly of the lemon steam from the service hallway tea station. I knew that smell, the way I knew every smell in that hotel. Because I had supervised that hallway for 11 years, and the tea station was a specific machine with a specific steam profile, I filed it as, he is a nervous man who needed a moment to decompress. People do that at their own weddings. I have watched it happen from the other side of the service past more times than I can count. When I was making my way around the far tables to thank guests personally, I passed a round table near the window where a woman named Celeste Monroe was sitting. She was listed on the seating chart as Daniel's old family friend. She was 43, composed in a way that read as effortless until you spent enough time in rooms with composed people to recognize that it took work. She had hugged Daniel during the cocktail hour with the particular ease of a woman who did not need to establish anything, who was not performing familiarity because the familiarity was real. I had noticed that hug. I had filed it as, they are old friends. He said so. This is what old friends look like. Under the edge of Celeste's dessert plate, I saw a cream envelope. The same stationery as the suite. The same gold sticker seal. Daniel's handwriting on the front. I knew it from grocery lists, from the birthday card he had left on my pillow in February, from the signature on the lease transfer document when he had sublet his apartment in preparation for moving into my house. I could not read the full name on the envelope before Celeste pressed her palm over it. The motion was smooth, practiced, unhurried, the motion of someone who knew something was going to need covering and had already decided how. To cover it without drawing attention, she looked up at me with a smile that arrived 1 second after it should have. I thanked her for coming. I said I was glad she could be there. I moved to the next table. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm until the feeling passed. I told myself it was a personal note, something thoughtful between old friends at an important occasion. I believed this for approximately immately 2 hours. In the bridal suite, Daniel claimed exhaustion the way he always claimed exhaustion after social events, mildly, with a kind of soft performance of being drained, as though sociability cost him something and he needed me to acknowledge the cost. He went to shower. I sat in the chair by the window for a moment and listened to the water run, and then I did what I always do in hotel rooms out of professional habit. I checked the surfaces. I straightened the items on the luggage stand, and I picked up his rented tuxedo jacket to hang it on the coat hook before the morning courier arrived to collect it. I checked the pockets. Hotel habit. I have found phones, wallets, and once a woman's earring in a man's inside breast pocket that ended a 6-year marriage when his wife came to our lost and found window 6 weeks later and recognized the description. The inside breast pocket of Daniel's tuxedo held 3 cream envelopes. Same stationery, same gold stickers, each one sealed. Each one addressed in Daniel's handwriting with a name that was not mine. One envelope said, "For when you panic." One said, "For after the brunch." The third one said, "For Monday, when the money clears." I stood holding those 3 envelopes, and I did not move for what felt like a very long time. The shower was still running. The air conditioner in the suite clicked twice, settled, clicked again. A phone buzzed somewhere on the table behind me, and I did not reach for it. My stomach went cold in a way that had nothing to do with emotion and everything to do with the Monday wire transfer. I had authorized 72 hours earlier. Not romantic cold, banking cold, signature cold. The cold of a woman who has spent her whole professional life catching wrong details and who has just caught the biggest one of her life in her own hotel suite on her own wedding night. This is the part where a different woman might have walked into the bathroom and confronted him with the envelopes in her hand. I am not that woman. I am a woman who has spent 26 years solving problems quietly before they became public scenes. And I understood in that moment, standing beside the luggage rack with 3 cream envelopes in my hand and the shower running, 12 feet away, that I was not looking at a marital problem. I was looking at evidence. And evidence has a procedure. I filled the kettle, the small silver one on the coffee tray, hotel standard, sitting beside the chamomile basket and the welcome card, congratulating us as a newly married couple. I let it reach a full boil. I held the first envelope in the steam at the angle you use when you are opening anything. Sealed with a sticker rather than a gummed flap, patient, level, unhurried. Because if you rush it, you tear the paper, and tearing the paper changes what you have from evidence into argument. The gold sticker lifted clean on all 3. I need to tell you what was in those envelopes precisely, because the emotional content is less important than the practical content, and I want you to understand the practical content the way I understood it standing in my wedding suite at 11:45 at night, with the shower still running and a kettle cooling beside me. Daniel wrote to Celeste about our wedding the way you write about a difficult transaction you are relieved to have nearly completed. He described the ceremony as necessary. He described me by name, which I mention only because it is important to know that he was not vague. He was specific. He had thought this through. He described me as someone who trusted paperwork more than people, and he wrote this as though it were a flaw that had worked in his favor. He told Celeste not to worry about the situation because I was practical, and practical women handled disappointment practically, and she would have what she needed by Tuesday at the latest. He used the word breathing room. He wrote that once I sent the down payment wire for the lake cottage, they would have breathing room. The most important sentence in those 3 letters, and I want you to hold this sentence the way I have held it since that night, the way you hold something that clarified everything at once, was this: by Monday, her money will be in the account with my name on it. Not our account. Not the joint account he had suggested opening. The one I had agreed to because I believed we were merging our lives. His account, with my money moving into it under the cover of a lake cottage purchase that was never going to benefit both of us equally. He had built a 4-step plan: ceremony, brunch announcement, Monday wire, access. I was step 3. I was always step 3. I sat on the edge of the bed with all 3 letters open in front of me, and I thought about every decision I had made in the past 2 years that had led to this specific moment, and I did not allow myself to feel any of it fully yet, because feeling it fully would have made the next 2 hours impossible, and the next 2 hours were the most important 2 hours of the whole story. I pressed my thumbnail hard into the center of my palm and held it there until my thoughts organized themselves into sequence. I wanted to walk into the bathroom and throw the envelopes at him through the shower curtain. I want to be honest about that. I wanted to walk down the hall and knock on Celeste Monroe's room door until the whole corridor woke up, and everyone who had attended my wedding understood what kind of evening this had actually been. I typed a message to the family group chat in the Notes app on my phone, the version that named everything and everyone and used capital letters and left nothing out. I read it back twice. Then I deleted it. Anger would give Daniel a scene he could characterize however he wanted. Proof would give me a room he could not manage. I got dressed in the hotel robe. I photographed every page of every letter beside the hotel room clock, which displayed the date and time in the corner of every frame. 12 photographs, total, clear, properly lit, each page flat on the white duvet so there was no ambiguity about what was being shown or when. I resealed each envelope over the steam, carefully, pressing the gold stickers back at the same angle I had found them. I placed all 3 back in Daniel's tuxedo breast pocket in the same order and hung the jacket on the coat hook for the morning courier. Then I went downstairs. The hotel night manager was a man named Theo. I had worked alongside Theo for 11 years. He managed overnight operations. I managed events. And we had built a professional shorthand from a decade of solving the kinds of problems that arrive at 11 in the evening and cannot wait until the morning shift. He was at the front desk doing end-of-shift reconciliation when I came down, and he looked at me the way a person looks at you when they understand that whatever you are about to say is not a simple question, even if it sounds like one. I asked him whether the bridal suite had received a stationery request during the reception hours. Theo looked at me for 3 full seconds. Then he turned to his monitor and pulled up the service request log for the evening. At 8:47 in the evening, while the band was playing, while my father was raising a glass, while 112 people were looking at the dance floor, Daniel Whitaker had called down from the bridal suite and requested 3 cream envelopes, a sheet of bridal suite letterhead stationery, and brief access to the service kettle station on the second-floor corridor. The request was lobbed under the room number and his name. Theo confirmed that the stationery had come from the locked wedding office supply cabinet, keyed to the event coordinator. It was dated to that evening. It was not something Daniel had brought from home. It was not something written weeks or months before the wedding. It was hotel property, issued on the night of our reception, during the reception, while Daniel Whitaker was supposed to be at the head table telling me he was the luckiest man in the room. I asked Theo if he would provide a written statement confirming what the log showed. He said yes, without hesitation, which told me something about what he thought of what he had just shown me. He printed the log entry, added a handwritten confirmation at the bottom, signed it, and dated it at 12:34 in the morning. I thanked him and went to the business center. In the business center, I made 3 complete copies of each letter, labeled by envelope, and placed 1 full set in my own evening bag. I sealed the second set in a plain hotel envelope and left it at the front desk marked for morning pickup in my name only. I kept Theo's written statement in my hand. Then I called my bank's after-hours fraud line and explained that I needed a hold placed on a scheduled outgoing wire transfer pending an in-person review. The representative placed the hold in under 4 minutes. I called the escrow officer I had been coordinating with on the Lake Cottage account and sent a text message. 1 sentence. Do not add Daniel Whitaker to any account. Deed. Or wire instruction until I speak to you in person. Sent at 12:51 in the morning. I did not explain. Escrow officers do not need explanation from the account holder. They need clear instruction. And I was the account holder, and my instruction was clear. I went back upstairs. Daniel was asleep. The shower had long stopped. I sat in the chair by the window and watched the hotel parking lot below and thought through the morning until I had it in order in my mind, and then I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark until the sky outside began to go gray. The gift opening brunch had been scheduled by the wedding planner as a warm conclusion to the celebration. Both families. The hotel's private dining room, champagne and coffee and pastry baskets, and the ritual of opening envelopes together. Daniel had mentioned the brunch 4 separate times in the week before the wedding. always in connection with the joint account. The brunch is when we announce the transfer, right? When both families know things are moving forward? He had framed it as shared excitement about the future. I understood now that he had been confirming his own timeline. The brunch was when I was supposed to announce that my money was in motion. That was his closing bell. I dressed carefully that morning. Same shoes as the ceremony. Hair up the same way. I wanted to look, to anyone watching, exactly like the woman they had seen the night before. Rested, steady, unremarkable. I collected the 3 cream envelopes from Daniel's tuxedo pocket for the last time, before the courier arrived. I placed them on the small silver coffee tray from the suite service station, standing upright, in order. I carried that tray down to the private dining room before any other guest arrived and placed it at my seat at the head of the table. Then I poured myself a coffee from the side station and waited. Daniel's mother arrived first. She sat to my left, her purse on the chair beside her, and I could see the corner of the marriage license envelope above the bag's opening. She had brought it to be signed and filed, as planned, as the legal completion of what had begun the previous evening. She hugged me. She said she was so happy for both of us. I said I was too, and I meant it, in the particular way of a woman who knows she's about to be very clear about. What happens next? Celeste arrived with several other guests from Daniel's side. She had sunglasses on that she did not remove when she came inside, which was either affectation or information. I suspected it was both. She took a seat near the window at the far end of the table, which was exactly where I would have sat in her position. I watched her notice the silver tray at my seat. I watched her notice the envelopes on it. I watched her pick up her water glass and hold it without drinking. Daniel came in last. He moved through the room with the easy confidence of a man who believes the day is already decided. He squeezed my shoulder, kissed my cheek, settled into his seat beside me. His eyes went to the silver tray, made a quick calculation, and moved away. He reached for his coffee. He said good morning to the table. He was, I will give him this, very good at the performance of ordinary. I waited until the pastry baskets had gone around the table and the room had settled into the comfortable noise of family catching up on a morning after a celebration. I waited until coffee had been poured twice, and someone had made a small joke, and laughter had moved around the table, and everyone had exhaled into the ease of a morning that felt like it was going to be simple. Then I placed my hand on the first envelope and said, in a normal voice, to Daniel, before we open any of the gift envelopes, I would like you to read the name on this one. He looked at it. His hand came off his coffee cup and picked up the envelope, and I watched his grip tighten on the paper. Not a large movement, not a dramatic one. Just the slight overbend of a corner where the pressure in his fingers was more than the situation required. He did not read the name aloud. He looked at me, and in that look, I saw him try 3 different approaches in approximately 2 seconds. Confusion, then dismissal, then something that was not quite fear but was adjacent to it. Daniel's brother was sitting directly across the table. He watched Daniel's face go through those calculations and asked, flatly, "Why is a woman's name on your wedding stationery?" Celeste's hand moved toward her water glass and missed it. The glass rocked once and did not spill, and nobody at the table reached to steady it. The sound of it rocking on the tablecloth was very small and very clear in a room that had stopped producing other sounds. I opened the second envelope. I slid the letter across the white tablecloth to Daniel's mother. She picked it up the way you pick up something your hands already know is going to change the weight of the day. She read it once. The fork she had been holding lowered onto her plate with a small click and stayed there. Tines down, abandoned. She did not look up immediately. She read it a second time. Then she folded it carefully along its original crease and laid it flat on the tablecloth in front of her. And she did not offer it back to her son. Nobody raised their voice. "That is the detail I want you to carry with you," because it was the detail that undid Daniel most completely. He had been prepared, I believe, for tears or accusations or a scene he could call emotional and therefore manageable. He was not prepared for a table full of people who read a letter and made quiet, individual, irreversible decisions about what they had just learned. He was not prepared for a room that processed information instead of producing feeling. Daniel started talking. He said the letters were written months ago. He said they were old correspondence, out of context. That he and Celeste had a complicated history. He had not known how to explain. He said if I would just let him explain, if everyone would just give him a moment, the door to the private dining room opened. Theo was still in his night manager uniform, which he had not changed out of before coming in at my request. He stood at the entrance, calm, professional, unhurried, and he confirmed for the room that the hotel service log showed Daniel Whitaker requesting bridal suite stationery, 3 cream envelopes, and kettle access at 8:47 in the evening the previous night. He placed the printed log on the table beside the silver tray. He said he was available if anyone had questions about the record. Then he left. The timeline Daniel had been constructing collapsed in the space between Theo walking in and Theo walking out. The letters were not old. The letters were not context that had been misread. The letters were written during our wedding reception on hotel stationery that Daniel had specifically requested during the reception, logged by name, logged by time, confirmed by a hotel employee who had no reason to lie and every professional reason to be accurate. Daniel stopped talking, not in a dramatic way, the way a car stops when the engine cuts, a gradual loss of momentum, and then nothing. His brother pushed his chair back from the table. It was a small movement, not loud, not theatrical, but it was a movement away from Daniel and toward nothing in particular, and everyone at the table understood what it meant. He looked across the room to where Celeste was sitting, and he said, quietly enough to be polite and clearly enough to be heard, "You need to leave before your husband gets here." The word husband landed in the room differently than any other word had. I had not known Celeste was married. From the way that information settled across the faces at the table, most of the people present had not known either. Celeste set her water glass down, stood up, and left the room without speaking to anyone. Her sunglasses were still on. Daniel's mother opened her purse. She removed the marriage license envelope, the one she had brought to be signed and filed, the one that was supposed to make the previous evening legally permanent. She placed it on the table in front of me. Not in the center, not in front of Daniel. In front of me. She looked at her son for a long time without saying anything, and then she said 3 words I did not expect. "Fix it, Daniel." Not, "Is this true?" Not, "Explain yourself." She had read the letter. She knew it was true. What she was telling him was that the damage was his problem to manage, and that she was removing herself from the management of it. "You did not write vows to me. You wrote instructions for how to use me." He had no answer for that. Not because the line was clever, but because it was accurate. And accuracy in front of witnesses is the one thing a man running a performance cannot recover from. The performance requires a shared agreement that things are something other than what they are. Proof ends the agreement. People began finding reasons to leave in the way people do when they have absorbed something. They cannot unknow and need to be somewhere private to absorb it. There were phones checked, coats gathered, hugs offered that were really exits. No dramatic goodbyes. Daniel's brother and his wife left without speaking to Daniel. Celeste was already gone. The gift envelopes sat in the center of the table, and no one opened them. Daniel sat at the table for 10 minutes after most people had cleared out. I sat at the head of it and did not move, because I had nothing to hide and nowhere I needed to be. He tried once more to speak, and then he stood up, gathered the rental receipt for his tuxedo that I had placed on the table beside his coffee cup, and left the private dining room. He left without the gift checks, without the marriage license, without the wire transfer he had built his entire plan around. He left with his tuxedo receipt and a room key that was going to be deactivated at checkout. He did not say goodbye. I did not expect him to, and I did not want him to. In the weeks that followed, he left voicemails. I listened to the first one. It was an explanation, and then a justification, and then it began to shift toward accusation in the particular progression that I have come to. Recognized as the default sequence of a person who has been caught and does not know what else to do, I did not listen to the rest of them. Celeste sent one message asking whether I had ruined enough lives. I read it once, the way you read a message that tells you more about the sender than it does about you. I did not respond. My attorney confirmed that, because the marriage paperwork had not been filed before, the hold was placed. The annulment process, while not without its paperwork, was significantly cleaner than it would have been otherwise. The word she used was manageable, and I found that word comforting in the way that only a very practical woman can find a word, like manageable comforting after her wedding. The wire transfer stayed frozen. The escrow officer confirmed that Daniel's name had never been added to any account or deed, because I had stopped it before a single document was signed with both names on it. The wedding gift account was released back to my sole control once I provided the bank with documentation. I returned the gift checks to the guests who had written them with a handwritten note. It took me 3 evenings at the kitchen table to write them all. 3 weeks after the wedding, that did not last until Monday, I stood at my bank with the branch manager I had worked with for 9 years. We opened a safe deposit box. I placed inside it the 3 original cream envelopes, still sealed, exactly as they were the morning of the brunch. I placed Theo's written statement beside them. I placed the printed service log beside that. I placed the wire hold confirmation on top. I closed the box. The branch manager handed me the key. It was small, flat, silver, unremarkable, the way the most important things in your life often are, once you stop needing them to look significant. I put it on a plain silver chain I already owned and wore it inside my shirt. Not as a trophy. Not as a wound I was keeping open. As a reminder of one specific thing, proof is only useful if you are calm enough to collect it in the first place. Anger would have given Daniel a story. Proof gave me the room and everything that follows from the room. My house has a new lock on the front door. The key Daniel had copied is somewhere on a keychain that no longer comes near my property. I changed the lock myself on a Saturday morning in October with a new hardware kit from the home supply store and a tutorial I had to watch twice because I am a hotel manager, not a locksmith. It took me 40 minutes. When I was done, I stood on my own front step in the autumn light and held the new key in my hand. And I felt something I do not have a clean word for. Not triumph, not relief, not happiness exactly. Certainty. The specific and irreplaceable feeling of knowing that what is yours is yours. I still work at the same hotel. I still walk the service hallway. I still know exactly what the lemon steam from the second-floor tea station smells like. I still check coat pockets before they go to the courier, not because I am afraid of what I will find, but because I have always checked coat pockets, and I will not let Daniel Whitaker be the reason I stop. I do not think of myself as a woman who survived a betrayal. That framing gives Daniel too much of the story. I think of myself as a woman who saw a wrong detail, followed the proof chain without letting her feelings get ahead of her hands, and did not allow one more person in her life to mistake her patience for permission. That is the whole story. Everything else, the envelopes, the brunch, the wire hold, the annulment paperwork, was just the procedure. The safe deposit key is on its chain inside my shirt right now, small and flat and silver against my collarbone. I press my thumbnail into my palm, sometimes in long meetings when I need to stay focused. And when I feel the key against my skin, I remember the precise and clarifying feeling of standing in the hotel business center at 1 in the morning making 3 copies of letters that were meant to use me, and understanding that the only difference between being used and not being used was what I did. And the next 6 hours, I made the right choice with those 6 hours. The silver key is proof of that, and I keep my proof close. If you found those envelopes on your wedding night, would you expose him at breakfast or disappear before anyone got to dessert?